Hello, thank you for joining us today with our innovation mapping webinar. Today I do have a special speaker that's going to be giving us some insight on innovation mapping. He is Dr. Axel Meierhoefer. He actually brings 3 decades of executive experience to his work in international training. He's a facilitator, business and executive coach, author, speaker, and business consultant. He is the founder of 3 enterprises, which is Axel Meierhoefer Consulting, Innovision Global, and Coaching Academy in Europe. Axel's 4 focus areas and specialties include facilitation and teaching, learning design and implementation, business, executive coaching, and business consulting. Axel holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Aviation and Management. He also has a Master's in Organizational Management and a PhD in Leadership. I bring to you Dr. Axel. He's actually going to be speaking with us today, giving us insight. Everyone should have received their handouts. I emailed everyone their handouts, which have not only the PowerPoint slides, but the mini innovation mapping worksheet or handout that you can follow along as he goes through everything in detail on how to use this. I'm going to go ahead and give the line over to Dr. Axel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bridget, and thank you everybody for being here today. And thanks again for making this possible. So this is our innovation mapping workshop webinar for your particular group. And what we want to touch on in the next about 45-50 minutes is to give you a little bit of an introduction into Innovision Global, our company, then the Certified Leadership Program. That is kind of like the big bucket of where we do our training and innovation mapping itself. We want to talk about how it was developed, what the purpose is, what are the benefits and what problems can get solved using it. How does the process actually work should any one of you decide for your organization or for a group that you are part with to maybe want to do a workshop. And then specifically for our group today, we created what's called an individual learning mini-map. This is something that you can do for yourself just to get a little bit into the mindset of how something like this actually works. We don't really, in this case, have a particular special offer. We just hope that you're interested and you have our information and we get your information and we stay in touch and see how we can help each other. And after we went through the little mini-map for you guys, then we want to actually do some question and answer session, opening up the microphones and giving you an opportunity to ask questions for what you might be interested to do with innovation mapping or how it can be applied and what we have done with it in the past. And then also you will have our contact information at the end. So that's kind of the plan going forward. And let's start right out. Like I said, Innovision Global is a company now in its 4th year of operation that came out of Harry Shades, my partner's company, and my company. And we are using the slogan, changing the world of business. And like Bridget already said, we have a lot of experience in designing, developing, and delivering training solutions. We have become experts in leadership improvement, business development, and we have coaching and mentoring programs. And we also have a new thing that we're working on this year is to help veterans who come out of the military services utilize their practical skills in the real world as well as becoming business owners and not just necessarily going out for a job. We are members in CEO space and have offices in New Mexico, Las Vegas, Nevada, and in Ohio. So when you look at the biggest offering that we have, we call that the Certified Leadership Practitioner Program, where innovation mapping actually fits in. The overall program is 118 hours and consists of a multitude of practical, interactive, very experiential training programs that allow you to really hone your skills if you are looking to become a certified leadership practitioner. Some of these programs also include continuing education credits, so should you or in your organization someone have a need to receive continuing education credits to upkeep your license, we can be a resource for you, and I put the website on here, so if you want to dig a little deeper on your own, find out what we do and how we do it, you can do that at innovisionglobal.com. For particular information about the Certified Leadership Practitioner Program, you just click on the CLP tab. So that's just a little bit of an introduction. Now, when we're talking about innovation mapping, this is basically a starting point that we came to when we did some analysis and some studies trying to find out how do people actually learn. And there is a example here of innovation mapping that we used, or I actually facilitated, in a case where a city wanted to make a fundamental change to their core downtown area. And the question was, okay, what are the aspects that we're looking at? What is the economic, social, and environmental impact? And how can we all work together? But at the same time also asking ourselves, when we have some ideas, when we have actually come up with some questions, when we have identified some opportunities, how do we actually communicate this in a way that is attractive to the audience we want to work with? And one thing we have learned long time ago is when you have something visual, basically in this case like a poster that could also be a postcard, it becomes way more attractive and more people can find something that attracts them to come to a workshop, to come to a meeting, to actually make it part of their cubicle or office and have it as a consistent reminder so that they can actually implement the things that came out of the individual workshop. Now, going back a little bit in history, how did we actually get to do innovation mapping? And how did the innovation maps that we're doing now in the form of workshops and actually having the participants, you as the listeners who come to a workshop, are the ones who are the creators of the innovation map. And just so you have an idea of the size, a full-scale innovation map that is created within the workshop by a group of 4 to 5 people is about 20 by 30 inches in size. So it's kind of like a good-sized poster. It's not just a single little piece of paper. And with this space, you also have the opportunity to put quite a bit of information on. So how did this all start? There is the book that you see here on the right side called Fifth Generation Management, written by Dr. Charles Savage, who at the time was, as an academic in Germany from the United States, working on how can we actually improve business processes when it comes to we have a problem or we have an issue that has been identified. How can we explore all the different things that inform this problem? So he wrote this book, and within the book he describes for the first time a process that is very interactive that can help uncover what the things are that influence a problem or an issue. Out of that, in 2008, came a process that he and I developed called discovery mapping. And discovery mapping basically goes in the direction of universities and helps students at universities to explore what are all the different things that influence an issue or a problem that they are addressing as a topic of learning. Now in this case, when we were on the university level, we had come up with basically vignettes or little scenarios, or took situations that had been written in business books to apply discovery mapping to. From there, we actually took one step further. I took one step further because Charles decided to stay in the European university system. I was here in the United States, and I got the opportunity to do innovation mapping more and more with university students and classes and degree programs in the business field. And what we discovered in this process is that when you have the map, the process doesn't really quite stop yet. Having the map, as I said earlier, actually helps you to have a constant reminder, to have visual cues and triggers, where when we know that 65%, roundabout 65% of the population is predominantly visual. That means we can memorize stuff much better, and we have a better connection when we see something visual. For example, photo that we took at a vacation, we can completely bring back all the memories from the vacation by looking at the photo, rather than listening, which is kind of, if you think about, a little bit funny, because most of our school life we are listening to a teacher. Now yes, admittedly they have blackboards and now they use more and more PowerPoint, and it's still a lot of the information is transferred verbally, even though the majority of us is actually more inclined to learn visually. So we wanted to do that visual learning and incorporate that into the business process at universities and schools in their business programs. And then an opportunity arose where we were looking at, can we do the same process in business as well? So the process enhancement started in 2011, and what it basically means is combining the normal way of actually getting to the map with action steps and commitments that the group that actually developed the map is making to implement whatever these commitments are into the daily business process. So we added a couple of steps and at the same time looked at opportunities to use technology to reduce the time it actually takes to create the map. And with some tweaking and working on it, we are now at a point where an innovation mapping workshop can basically be done pretty much in a day and a half. It used to be 3 days in the past. Now we can do it in a day and a half. The business application was presented at the end of 2011, and we have now been doing the new version, the business relevant version of innovation mapping since then, and are currently in the process to see if some of those commitment and action steps that at the end of the process the team members actually promised to each other and to their manager or to their leader, if we can make them part of mobile applications on your smartphone so that certain things that you want to be reminded for can actually be automated, and every day or once a week or whatever it may be, you get reminders and kind of check-ins to find out how far have you already gotten with the implementation. So this is kind of like how the development for innovation mapping has gone so far, and you can see this is not a spring chicken anymore. This started quite a while ago and we have refined it more and more. When we look at what does it really do, what is it really good for? There are a couple of things that I've listed here, and you have the deck for the slides as well. Raising the level of awareness for an issue is one of the core things, and the reason it does this is because it kind of changes the paradigm from what we typically find when a problem has been identified is that we're coming together in some way, shape, or form. Let it be a meeting, let it be some kind of workshop or a leadership retreat or a project team meeting or something like that, and we're looking for answers. Also, in many cases, when a problem arises, it's a one-on-one. We actually found that in innovation mapping, it's actually very helpful to work in diverse groups on the problem or issue that we're facing. On the raising the level of awareness, one thing that we are actually doing in innovation mapping, and I'm going to dig into this a little deeper, is that we are developing questions. And by having to develop questions, we're actually having to use different parts of our brain to address the issue or problem that we have identified, rather than what we do on a daily basis, most of us at least, is finding and trying to find answers and solutions. The other aspect, the purpose of innovation mapping, is that it really anchors the results that you have come up with when you created the map as into your long-term memory as a vacation picture. And if you think about it, about a vacation picture, it's not only what you see on the picture. There's a huge difference when you show the picture that you took at a vacation or like some kind of an amazing event to other people where they see the content, kind of like a two-dimensional thing. They might see you standing with your spouse or friend or somebody at the rim of the Grand Canyon, and they see the scenery and you smiling and having a good time. When you look at that picture, you see all of that, but you also remember, how did it smell? What was my mood? How did it feel? Was I happy at the time? All those kind of things, all those sensory things that you take in at the moment when the picture was taken are basically coming back, and they come back with the picture as a trigger. And that shows how pictures actually are anchoring the information deeply in our memory and allow us to bring them back. And that's part of one of the strongest things that innovation mapping achieves. Now, the other thing is when you get deep into a topic, when you get the chance to really think about and work on something for a day or a day and a half, it really brings up different perspectives. That's why we're doing it in groups. And part of these different perspectives come out while you're developing the map, but more so they come out when you take the map that you and your group have developed and now explain it and interact about it with other people who were not part of that development process. And that's what we call the unexpected learning, and we're using a process in that context called World Café, where you have tables set up with the maps on the table, and you basically represent, one of your group members represents your map, and all the other group members from other groups come by and look at your map and work with you on it. The difference between the original 90s and early 2000 discovery mapping to the innovation mapping is that at the end of the workshop, or towards the end of the workshop, we actually create an action plan for success that has accountability in it, that has action steps in it, that has commitments in it, things that can be measured and that are actually tangible, so that you can go back after 3, 6, 9, 12 months and say, okay, how much of the things that we have committed to do have we actually implemented, and how successful were we? And then the follow-up and reinforce learning to cement the organizational culture, that is basically making sure that the commitments and the action plan that you have come up with is aligned and fits well into what you overall want to achieve as an organization, and putting it and doing it in a way that actually fits with the way you operate. If you, for example, look as an example into the automobile industry, there are all kinds of different makes and models that are being made, but the way they actually get to the end result of the car that you can buy in the dealership is significantly different from manufacturer to manufacturer. That's kind of like the culture, the uniqueness of how these particular organizations function, and whatever your action plan and commitments are based on the map that has been created, or maps, multiple, has to fit into the organizational culture. And then you can follow up and see, okay, if there is a change happening, is the change visible and measurable, and does it fit well into the way we operate? So that's basically a list of purposes. And the reason I wanted to show you this is because I feel sometimes we do one thing for one outcome. When you do innovation mapping, you do one thing, one process, one workshop, but you have a multitude of outcomes that can help you improve the success of your organization, or your project team, your department, your division. You can go as small as 16 people and as big as however many multitudes of 16 peoples you can come up with. So on the benefits and problems solved on the team side, we actually have this process in a team environment. So that helps you to actually come up with new ideas and really tap into the creativity of the team members. That's why we also like to set up the teams that work on each individual map in a way that you have diverse abilities coming together. Somebody might be better in drawing. Somebody really likes pictures or can find awesome stuff on the internet. Somebody else is better in putting things in text. Another person really knows how to use PowerPoint or a similar program really well to put the map actually together. So that's the aspect of the team building and team working that happens. Collaboration is naturally enforced just by the process. We don't do anything specific about it. We're just working together. It's facilitated. We are helping each other to achieve this actual tangible outcome of the map. And in the process, we learn our strengths and weaknesses and how we can improve our collaboration. So the benefits and the problems that are solved is shown here in pictures, quite multifaceted. And depending on what kind of a situation you are encountering, that might inform you, is innovation mapping a good option to consider to see if we can actually help you to overcome a situation that you may be facing within your organization or within your team. So there is a significant number of things that I believe you will benefit from. Now, with that all being said, you probably asked yourself, well, how does this actually work? How do we actually get to the map? And I put together a little bit of a description of the process. So typically we start in the top left-hand corner, and we have kind of like a blank slate. Now, what we use, or what I like to use, because most people in most organizations these days are familiar with, is either PowerPoint as a software, or something that has a similar feature where at the end you have basically one slide that you can print out on a big printer, and then you have your map. We start with a clean slate and we basically look at, okay, what is the topic or the issue that we want to address, and then go into certain different areas that are shown here in the top left-hand corner. And when you think about it, I mentioned that we typically like to have 16 or multiples of 16 people in a workshop. In the middle of this top left-hand corner screen, you see that there are 4 areas. We call those the areas of powerful questions, and they are powerful questions we asked our team members in a group to come up with. Powerful questions. The first area is about the challenges that fall under this particular topic. So you see an example there in the middle of a map that has been done by a group, and their topic was environmental and international business, and the challenge is the different entities with different interests. How do we bring them together and make them effective working? So one of the blocks there to the top left in the middle, it basically says, okay, what are the challenges? And let's come up with at least 3 or 4 questions that we would have to ask to really bring out the challenges in this particular situation. The second area is, what are the things that are linked together? And what do we need to ask? Again, come up with 3 or 4 open-ended, powerful questions that we can ask, so that when somebody who is not necessarily in-depth into this problem, or somebody who is in our team but only looks at things from one perspective, can actually come up with answers that help us. The third area is what we call tipping points. And that is basically thinking about, if we have this topic or this issue and we were to take it to the extreme, what kind of questions would we need to ask that make somebody consider, if we do this, we just get to the edge and we're still safe. If we go one step further, then we go over the tipping point, and it could either be a huge, huge success, or it could be something quite risky, maybe even to the point where you say, you know, I don't really want to assume that kind of risk now that I'm thinking about it this way. And the fourth area for coming up with 3 to 4 powerful questions is to consider, what would we need to ask to uncover or discover anything that might be unknown about this problem or the issue. So when we go to the picture in the middle, when they were to ask themselves, okay, there are different entities with different interests, what kind of questions do we need to ask to come up with things that are not already obvious for this particular group working together? The time that it typically takes to have 4 people that have different roles within the workshop for this particular map to come up with the questions, also come up with people and entities who are related to the topic, links that exist internally and externally, any kind of examples that they can draw from, maybe examples you find on the internet or examples that you have seen in other departments, examples that you have seen certain people within your group doing, and you wonder if that would be an opportunity for everybody else to learn how to do it. So all these things to populate the map typically takes about 6 hours. And during these 6 hours, you learn the process, you learn the discussion, you work on coming up with the questions, and you ultimately populate this one big 20 by 30 slide that we can then print. And so you can imagine that process, the first part, getting to know and become a little more familiar with what goes where, then actually really doing the work. That's pretty much the first day. Then we either internally, if you have it available yourself, or we go somewhere externally and get the maps printed. Typically, if we have 16 people in a group, that would be 4 maps. If you had 20, we do 5 maps, and then we can do multiples of 16 to 20 people for your organization. And when the maps have been printed, we come back the next morning typically, and we do what we call the World Café. So like I mentioned, we have the maps on the tables. We have people around the tables, and now one person of your group is going to represent your particular map, and you engage the other people that come visit to your table in the discussion. And you know what you're asking them? You're exactly asking them the questions that you came up with in those 4 areas in the middle. And now you get a vivid discussion about what's going on, what can we do, and you're not just using your creativity from your team, but you're bringing in the creativity of all the other team members who during the day before had worked on their map. With that being done, you're actually in this Word Cafe process, which typically takes about an hour and a half to 2 hours, you ultimately come, every time you go from one table to the next, there is something unexpected. And the way we're doing it is basically writing the things that you hadn't thought about that were kind of unexpected on a little sticky note, and when you move from table A to table B, you go by these kind of boards or whiteboards or whatever we have available, and you stick them onto the board. And so after we're finished with the Word Cafe round robin, so to speak, and we have all our sticky notes on the board, we have about 30 minutes to 45 minutes discussion to say, okay, with the unexpected learning, together with what we already have on our maps, what are some conclusions that we can draw? And you see all these lines that we have drawn here on the picture with the actual picture of the unexpected learning board. And then the last step is you come back into your groups, and you are back with your 4 or 5 participants. Now that you have seen everything, discussed everything, have developed all the unexpected learning and unplanned learning, you come up with about a 5-minute presentation for your group of what are your commitments, what is your implementation plan going forward. And then the last thing is we come together, and every group is basically telling, and oftentimes that's the time where either the leader or the executive team or somebody who has basically responsibility and authority over your overall participant group comes in to basically see those little and final presentations to say, okay, this is our map, here's our unexpected learning, here's what we learned today, and most importantly, here are the commitments and action steps that we are going to take to use what we have developed and actually bring it into our daily operations. That might be committing to a change process, might be committing to doing things differently, might be committing to creating a checklist, might be committing to engaging different groups in different ways in the future to get better results, and any other thing under the sky that you can imagine that could come out as a commitment now that you had the opportunity. And that's going back to the beginning, if you think about it, now that you had the opportunity to immerse yourself into this topic or into this issue, and really in a creative, interactive, experiential way, engage the other people, gather their information, gather their perspective from it, and then basically use this creative push to actually infuse and trigger and start change within the organization. So that's, in a nutshell, how the process actually works. So with that being said, Bridget, if you have the ability, I would like to take people through that little, what we call mini learning map that we have. And there are 2 ways to do it. I mean, you could theoretically just use your blank piece of paper and take you through, or you can use the PDF that Bridget had emailed to everybody. So if we want to open the lines, I would like to just basically take everybody a little bit through the process as we have suggested it. The reason we do this is basically you might have some individual issues, and we want to show you that you can use the same innovation mapping process for an individual issue.
Okay, all the lines are unmuted, so you can go ahead and have the discussion as a group. I have unmuted all the lines.
Okay, just a second. Let me bring something up here real quick. So I just want to make sure that I have the Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I think since I unmuted the line, there's an echo since I unmuted. There's an echo since I unmuted the lines.
Yeah, okay, maybe we take it off and then let's just go through the mini map and then we open it up for questions, okay?
Yeah, and the thing is, if there, everyone has a dashboard, so if there's any questions or if you have a question, you can actually type it at the bottom, and I'll bring it up to the panelists. So but if you do want to speak, all you have to do is click that button that has the hand mark and raise your hand, and I will unmute your line individually, so you can just speak while everyone else's line is muted. Because I do hear a lot of background noise from other attendees that are on the line.
Right, exactly. Thank you, Bridget. So, like I said, to look and go through your little mini map, like we said, you can either take a blank piece of paper or you can use the one in the PDF that we have provided you. And what you first want to do is kind of think about a challenge that you are currently facing in your work environment, in your job. Oh, it could be something else, but we're assuming that most of the HR professionals on the line here have something, you have an issue with an employee or an issue about training or whatever it may be, and you want to come up with a kind of a catchy phrase or some form of a title that describes this challenge that you are facing, and you put that kind of like on top of the page as your title of your own individual mini-map. And the second part about it is, and you can go all the way creative on this, is in the middle part, we want you to, and that would be the same when we're working just in much more depth and with more time, finding images that actually relate to this topic. So let's just grab an example, and let's say you have somebody that is really not a great communicator, and whenever you want to engage them or ask them a question or you need something from them, they have this really grumpy, aggressive reaction. So there are probably pictures that exemplify how that looks like. So you would go out on Google Images, or if you are somebody who can draw very well, or you might want to use a magazine or something like that, you can use pictures that show, on the one hand, how this reaction visually looks like. The other thing that you want to get pictures for is something that describes how you would like to have it look like ideally. Then you also want to think about, in a sense, what other pictures inform this situation. Would there be maybe some communication training that would be helpful to this person? Is there some opportunity for you to come together in some way and openly discuss this kind of borderline hostile or at least somewhat unpleasant reaction when you want to communicate with this person? So any kind of picture that you can come up with that actually helps describe the situation as you experience it, not just the negative, but also the positive, the opportunities, some things or people or institutions, organizations that could help you. All those little pictures you can put basically in the area right underneath your title. That is that area here on our screen that has that kind of like square. And you want to put the pictures in so that they can be triggers, visual triggers, as I said earlier, to help you remember what you were thinking about when you put the map together. Now, it is a little bit artificial here right now, because normally when you were to really do this, it would take probably anywhere between 10 minutes and half an hour to go out, like for example, to Google Images and just look at certain pictures under certain entries that you make, like grumpy face or something like that, and take them and paste them into your slide or into your PDF. So we're kind of jumping a little bit because we won't have the time to have you go through this, but I'd like you to at least have an idea of how this process works. The next step is to think about what are some of the commitments that you can make and what are the questions that you can ask. Now, as you know from the pictures that I showed you about the big map, we asked basically 4 different questions for each one of the 4 areas about challenges, linkages, unknowns, and tipping points. In this mini-map for yourself, it would be already very good if you can come up with one open-ended probing question. And if you wonder, okay, well, how does that work? What's an open-ended question? What you want to avoid is anything that would be leading. So a question that could be along the lines of, hey Bridget, don't you agree that this GoToMeeting system is really cool? That really leaves only yes or no as a possible answer. A closed question would also be asked in a way where the answer can only be yes or no, or a choice of one or two or three things that you have already predetermined. On the other hand, a probing open-ended question would be something along the lines of, how can we improve the communication between you, Johnny, and myself? That requires to think about it, and if you want to go a little deeper and become more familiar with the open-ended questioning technique, it is widely known on the internet, and you can find a lot of information about this kind of questioning technique. And if anybody has an interest in it, we are more than happy to send you materials that help you come up with open-ended questions. So that's the part that goes right underneath where you put your little pictures into the frame. And sometimes they might actually stick out a little bit over the frame. Then now that you have your question, you want to think about, okay, what am I going to do? What am I going to commit to do? So if you ask yourself, okay, how can I improve the communication with Johnny? One thing might be to say, okay, see if there's an opportunity to take Johnny to lunch out of our work environment so we have a little less stressful and less culture-influenced situation during which we can talk, and give yourself a date by when you want to have that completed. So you might say, okay, well, we're all pretty busy, and I don't know exactly how our schedules match up, but I want to make the commitment that I will take Johnny to lunch to talk about our communication issue before the month has ended, and so you would say by 8/31. The second thing might be, okay, I want to familiarize myself a little bit more with how can I ask better questions so I can discover why is Johnny the way he is. And you give yourself a date by when you want to do that. So the one is you want to come up with anywhere between 3 and 5 commitments that you're actually giving you, and never forget to put the date to it. And then we have basically a suggestion for you at the bottom of the page. When you look at it, we have these little boxes, and this goes basically to what a lot of you, if you ever go into like supermarkets or stuff like that, where somebody looks for help or a nanny or babysitting or so forth, they typically put their name and the phone number. And what we are suggesting is that you put your commitment with the date of completion in a little box, and then if you do it the way we're showing it here on the screen, and as you have it in your PDF, you can literally take some scissors and cut them into little strips. And what we want you to do, because there's also the aspect of doing something kinesthetic, meaning something that you actually physically do, tangibly do, and that indicates that you're making progress. So if you have your 4 commitments, you write them out, you give them the date, you write them into these little fields, and let's say sometime on the 25th of, no, let's say not on a Sunday, let's say on the 19th of August you took Johnny to lunch. Well, when you come back from lunch, you can literally kind of cut off or scrape off that first commitment. Hopefully, let's say the first commitment was actually getting the question, so you took that off already, you took Johnny to lunch, that was the second commitment. Let's say the third one is, okay, whatever you guys agreed to do at lunch or after lunch, you're going to implement it by the 15th of September. So you put that third commitment there, and when that is done, you can rip that off. And it gives you, for one, the pleasure of really physically doing this, and number 2, the visual thing, if you put this one sheet in your office somewhere where you can see it, and every time you complete a commitment, you can physically see that you're working your way forward. And you can do this over and over and over again, you know, when you have worked through one mini-map, or you might even have several going at the same time, so that you have an opportunity to see your own improvement. And ultimately, when you see the pleasure of doing this, having the successes, having the completion dates actually ripped off, that is also a good indication for you to get an idea of how it would be if you work with a larger group, like we suggest, 16 to 20 people, and you have commitments that you have together. And you can check in on a weekly or bi-weekly basis and see, did we actually achieve something and complete something, or help other people who may have an issue with the completion of things to actually get them done. So that's our suggestion on how to go about this, so that you actually not only think through it, find pictures about it, ask the really one, and you can ask more than one questions about it, make the commitments and put dates to it, and then work them through, but also to have, at least in a limited way, an idea how it would potentially be to do the innovation mapping in a larger group. So let me switch this back to our PowerPoint presentation. With that being said, and introducing the innovation mapping, we have about 15 to 20 minutes left, and I would like to open up the opportunity for people to ask questions, comments, anything that weren't quite clear, anything that you would like to know. And Bridget, for that, maybe you want to open up. If you have questions already typed in, then please let me know, or otherwise we can open up the lines. Hello, Bridget. Are you still there?
I'm still here. I'm actually looking. I'm actually looking right now. I do not see any questions at the bottom. If anybody has any questions, please type them at the bottom or raise your hand so I can unmute your line if you have any questions regarding the innovation mapping and how it's used. So definitely either type a question at the bottom if anything was not clear to you, or if you need to some elaboration on a particular item. Or is there anything that you see that people may find? Well, for you, Dr. Axel, is there anything that you find that people find challenging with innovation mapping, that once they start it, is it some roadblock that you see that they may have difficulty, that they may run into? Like, say, if you do the innovation mapping, and of course not all the parties agree with what's being put on the map, or there may just not be a meeting of the minds. Is there any way that you get around that?
Right. Yeah, thank you, Bridget. Well, two things to your question. The first part is, what challenges do a lot of people discover or experience when we're actually working through the workshop? And it's quite interesting. I think I would say when we were all very little, we had this inquisitive mind. And I know that a lot of moms know that from their toddlers, where every question is, why is this and why is that and what does this do and so forth. And over time, as we go through school life and then into our business life, it seems like we're getting less and less opportunity to actually do that. So one hurdle, just part of the process that I have discovered many times when doing innovation mapping, is how much we need to kind of force ourselves to come up with good questions, when we have been so much programmed to basically rather quickly be able to come up with either a suggestion or a solution to almost any problem that someone throws at us. So that's kind of like a procedural hurdle, or kind of like a hurdle particular to innovation mapping that people struggle a little bit with. On the other hand, when you actually go through the process and you, like I said, spend about 5-6 hours doing it, it really starts showing how much more powerful it is to explore a problem by asking good questions, rather than going and saying, okay, what are the 3 things that we can do to improve our communication skills? So that's the one aspect. The other aspect about any kind of frustrations while we're doing the workshop, what I have found to be really helpful is to work with the person who invited us in, and I put up our contact information so that the participants who see this live right now, or anybody who wants to look at the recording, can get in touch with us and discuss any kind of opportunities to come out and do a workshop with you in more detail. So what has proven to be really important is, whoever the coordinator on the client side is, to have a little bit of knowledge of what are the different characters and the different kind of situations that may be going on inside of the group. You might have people who really have already developed a grudge with somebody else. Well, maybe you don't want to necessarily put them together in the one table group, but keep them a little bit apart. You might already know that some people are really more creative and other people are a little more analytical. Well, you want to have a good mix of the creatives and the analyticals in the different table groups. And by doing that, and basically keeping an atmosphere of openness and creativity, we have had very, very few instances where we ever had somebody who, while doing the workshop, basically got somehow agitated or didn't like it or didn't want to work with their table group anymore. So it's really, in a long-winded way, saying it's a little bit in the setup and the planning. For that second question about, how do you overcome any kind of issues. Now, fundamentally, I want to say, Bridget, to do an innovation mapping workshop, there needs to be some sense, some urge or urgency to address an issue or problem. Innovation mapping wouldn't be something where you just say, we don't really have anything going on, we have nothing that we really need to change or want to change, but let's try innovation mapping. You need to have some kind of urgency, some kind of trigger, something that you want to improve, you want to change, you have identified a problem or an issue, and there's some willingness to address it somewhat different than what we oftentimes typically do, like either put out a commission or put a little work team together or like a crisis group or something. Innovation mapping is an alternative that is very interactive, very powerful, and relatively fast if you think about it, in a day and a half.
Okay.
Do you think that answers those
Yeah, that
points?
answers my question. And I also have a question. So I don't see anyone else have any questions down here. But as far as implementing, like say, an innovation mapping webinar, or trying to implement this at someone's current workplace, because we do have a lot of, let's say, managers or executives online, how would you get your team or your management or the powers that be to accept this type of thinking or this type of format of learning?
Well, one of the things that I always bring to the forefront when we discuss these kind of things is that we want to basically involve in our learning efforts as many of our senses as we possibly can. If you can touch something, if you can think about it, if it has pictures, if it is visual, if it is engaging, if it has questions and answers and connections and links, a little bit of technology, a little bit of old-fashioned having a piece of paper in front of you, the more sensors we can involve, the more the whole training experience or learning experience or strategizing experience, if you want to use it for that, is really engaging everybody. And as we all know, people are very different. Some people, like I said, are very analytical. Some people are pretty direct. They want to get to the point. They don't really want to spend a whole lot of time. Others in our teams, in our workplaces, are what I call considerate. That means they have certain agendas, but they're also always considering the team, the other members on the team, the other departments. And then there are what I call the spirited people, and the spirited people are the ones who really like to explore the why of any issue, so that with a full picture of information, they can, from their perspective, make better decisions. So in that sense, innovation mapping is really an attempt, a successful attempt, at least by my bias measure, that triggers and engages all the different senses, brings out all the different types of creativity to address an issue, a problem, or the desire to come up with a new strategy. And that is pretty, we have all these things separately, and you can do a strategy workshop in a meeting format, or you can do something creative work in your R&D department using pictures and stuff like that. What we have, I believe, successfully accomplished here with innovation mapping is that we bring all these sensory triggers together and have a process that is tight enough to actually accomplish it in a day and a half.
Yes, and I do have a question at the bottom. I did have a question asked by one of the participants. How would you recommend implementing this in an organization, in training, or in a meeting? So I guess they're asking, how would you actually introduce this type of method to your organization?
Well, if your own training department or HR department would like to make that process part of the way how you address or go about any issues that may have been identified, what we can do, Harry and I, we could come out and basically do what we would basically call train the trainer. And the best way to do that, in my experience, is actually to take a group. It doesn't necessarily have to be 16, but if you want to, you might as well take advantage, which consists of a bunch of the existing people who are normally providing training, and let them become certified in the process, and at the same time applying the process to see for particular things that happen in your training organization or in your organization as a whole, how powerful the process can be. And one thing I have to say, and I hope, Bridget, you forgive me for that, but in about 45-minute to 60-minute introduction to a webinar, we don't necessarily get to all the depths of learning theory and questioning theory and so forth. There's a bunch more stuff that people who are actually facilitating this type of approach would get to know in a train-the-trainer kind of environment. The other aspect is there are ways, from my perspective, where an organization can use these what I call visual artifacts for multiple different things. If, for example, you were to decide in your organization that you want to do innovation mapping to get like a fundamental idea of how do we want to push strategy or a new approach or change effort forward. And then you use basically the map, not just to come up with the commitments at the end, but the map itself, if you, for example, print it on postcards or these slightly little bit bigger postcards, and you give them to the people that are affected, the map itself almost becomes a little bit like a ticket or like a reminder that you can use to infuse the organization, and whenever that particular topic comes up, people make that connection with the actual visual, with the map or the postcard that you hand out, whether they were directly part of the original strategy workshop or if they are basically influenced by the commitments that come out at the end. And I can, whoever might have that question would like to know how can we make innovation mapping part of our training methodology, Harry and I are more than happy to talk about this a little more in depth, what you can do. But in a nutshell, it's really the development of whatever the strategy or the solution or the approach is supposed to be, and then use the map or any kind of downsized versions of the map as visual triggers to basically disseminate throughout the organization.
Okay, I hope that answers your question. As always, you can always reach out to them directly. I also do have your contact information, so I'll let them know so they can reach out to you as well, so you can get more information about passing this on to your training department, so you can have hands-on training with them if this is something that you want to implement within your organization.
Yep. And in the good sense, I mean, walking the talk, so to speak, Bridget, that also includes we have not always enough information and insider knowledge on how your organization actually ticks. So having the opportunity to do kind of like a pilot innovation mapping workshop oftentimes brings out from the organization itself, whether it's HR, the training department, many ideas where you, because you know what the issues are, how you work, how you train and so forth, where people come and say, oh man, we could do it this way, or we could apply it their way. Could we make it with a smaller group? Can we bring in a larger group and so forth? So that dynamic comes out typically after we have done like one pilot somewhere.
Okay, that makes sense. If there are any more questions, definitely type them at the bottom. I don't see any more as of now. If you have any more closing words, definitely you can go ahead and say them. I think that's wrapping that up for right now. I really think that innovation mapping is very innovative. I think this is something that a lot of companies can take advantage of, and like you said, it's very creative, and it's gets your staff to think outside the box in a more creative way.
Absolutely, Bridget. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. And one of the things is, you know, it's one thing to describe it somewhat in a theoretical way, you know, as if we were to describe in a webinar how to make the perfect anniversary dinner or something like that. There's, and naturally I keep saying I'm biased, and I think everybody understands that, but there's something to be said when you do something interactive, experiential, hands-on, finding pictures, having discussions, coming up with the questions, all that, where it's really in the experience. You know, it's one thing to show it. I would really hope that those of the listeners who have some interest, they kind of see the potential benefits, they see the novelty, the different way we are approaching issues like this, to basically make the jump and say, let's try it, because there's no other way than getting the full impact and the full appreciation than actually trying it, giving it its due day and a half for a limited group of people, and then see how powerful it can be. I can talk about it probably days and days and days. It still doesn't replace having tried it and actually been there and experienced it.
Yes. And like you said, this is just a snapshot of what innovation mapping is, because of course we don't have enough time to go into with every nook and cranny of what it is and what it can do. So this is just a snapshot or just an overview of what innovation can bring to your organization if applied correctly.
Exactly. You couldn't have said it any better, Bridget.
Well, if there is not any more questions, I definitely will want to thank Dr. Axel for giving us his time, and definitely all the material that he's given us has been very informative. At the end of this webinar, there is a survey I would love everyone to take. It's just a general survey about the webinar, how the presenter was, some of the information that you learned. I also have a question on the survey that asks if there are any other type of webinars that you would like for Career Innovations or for Innovision Global to present. So definitely leave your feedback if there's something that you would like to learn more of that Dr. Axel or Harry can definitely touch base on. If there's not anything else, it was great to have you, Dr. Axel, and hopefully we can do this again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us, Bridget, and thank you everybody for being here today. And for those of you who get this as a recording, same thing. If you need us, if you like us to help you, get in touch.
Thank you. You have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.